The radical side of Susan B. Anthony. They don't teach in school. When we hear the name Susan B. Anthony, images of a dignified suffragist fighting for women's right to vote often come to mind. She is taught in school textbooks as a heroic but peaceful reformer, someone who worked within the system to achieve social progress. Her face has even appeared on U.S. coins, suggesting mainstream reverence. But the truth about Susan B. Anthony is far more complex, controversial, and compelling. Underneath her carefully archived legacy lies a woman who was a radical revolutionary, unapologetically defying norms, breaking laws, and challenging the very structure of American democracy. This is the side of Susan B. Anthony. They don't teach in school, and it's the side that shaped real change. A childhood rooted in rebellion. Susan B. Anthony was born in 1820 in Adams, Massachusetts, to a Quaker family that believed in equality, education, and anti-slavery values. These beliefs planted the seeds for her lifelong activism, but they didn't go far enough. Even the Quaker society of her time maintained conservative roles for women, and Anthony quickly grew impatient with any structure, religious or political, that silenced half the population. At just 15 years old, she was already questioning authority. She began her career as a schoolteacher, where she encountered a glaring injustice. Male teachers were paid significantly more for the same work. This wasn't just an annoyance, it became her awakening to the systemic inequality women faced. It pushed her toward a life of activism that would span more than 5 decades. Not just a suffragist, but an abolitionist. Before Susan B. Anthony became synonymous with the women's suffrage movement, she was a dedicated abolitionist, fighting against the institution of slavery. She worked alongside prominent activists like Frederick Douglass and William Lloyd Garrison. In a time when it was risky for women to even speak in public, Anthony gave fiery speeches denouncing slavery and calling for its immediate end. Her anti-slavery activism wasn't just symbolic. She helped organize petitions, wrote pamphlets, and even risked arrest to support the Underground Railroad. She saw clear connections between the oppression of Black Americans and the disenfranchisement of women. In her mind, freedom was indivisible, either all were free, or none truly were. A constitution she couldn't respect. One of the most radical and overlooked elements of Anthony's activism was her open rejection of the U.S. Constitution, at least as it existed in her time. While most people viewed it as a sacred foundation of liberty, Anthony saw it as a flawed document written exclusively by white men who denied rights to women and enshrined slavery. In one of her most famous speeches, she declared, "It was we, the people, not we, the white male citizens, nor yet we, the male citizens." She refused to respect a government that excluded half its population from voting. After the Civil War, her fury only deepened when the 15th Amendment granted voting rights to black men but excluded women. While she had been an ally in the abolitionist movement, she believed true justice should never be selective. Her stance created a deep rift with longtime friend Frederick Douglass, as she criticized the prioritization of race over gender in suffrage policy. This choice led some to accuse her of racism or of placing women's rights above the rights of Black Americans. But Anthony's argument was different. She was against half measures, insisting that all people deserve equal rights at once, not based on political convenience. Defying the law to make a statement. Susan B. Anthony didn't just argue for change, she embodied civil disobedience. Her boldest and most radical moment came in 1872, when she illegally voted in the presidential election. At a time when women were barred from voting under federal law, Anthony entered a polling station in Rochester, New York, and cast her ballot anyway. She was arrested days later and put on trial. At her hearing, the judge refused to let her speak in her defense, found her guilty without jury deliberation, and fined her $100, a fine she never paid. She looked the judge in the eye and said, "I shall never pay $1 of your unjust penalty." This wasn't just a personal protest, it was a direct challenge to the legitimacy of the American legal system. Anthony knew she was committing a crime, but she believed the law was unjust and that disobedience was a moral imperative. Vilified by the media. While Susan B. Anthony is now remembered as a trailblazer, she was not widely celebrated in her own time. She was often mocked, vilified, and dismissed by newspapers and politicians. She was portrayed as manly, shrill, and dangerous. Her insistence on public speaking, especially without male accompaniment, was scandalous in the 19th century. Mainstream society viewed her not as a hero but as a threat. She challenged gender roles, criticized the government, and refused to stay silent. Even within the women's movement, some activists saw her as too radical, preferring a softer, more incremental approach. But Anthony didn't want to compromise, she wanted revolution. Strategic, tireless, and unapologetically bold. Anthony wasn't just loud, she was strategically brilliant. She co-founded the National Woman Suffrage Association with Elizabeth Cady Stanton and spent her life organizing conventions, lobbying politicians, and publishing feminist literature. She edited a newspaper called The Revolution, which carried the fiery slogan, "Men, their rights and nothing more, women, their rights and nothing less." She never married, claiming she could not be a slave to any man. She believed in complete autonomy, economic, political, and intellectual. Everything about her lifestyle was radical for the time. A legacy not fully honored. Susan B. Anthony died in 1906, 14 years before the 19th Amendment granted women the right to vote. Though she never witnessed her dream become law, her influence was critical to its success. Yet today, many of her most daring acts are omitted from school lessons. Why? Because institutions often prefer to sanitize history. It's easier to teach children about a calm reformer than a woman who questioned the Constitution, broke federal laws, and called out systemic oppression. But the real Susan B. Anthony wasn't polite. She was furious, relentless, and revolutionary. The rebel we need to remember. Susan B. Anthony's story is not just about one woman's quest for the vote. It's about defiance in the face of injustice, about refusing to accept laws that enshrine inequality, and about changing history not by asking nicely, but by demanding it. When we remember Anthony only as a mild-mannered suffragist, we do her, and ourselves, a disservice. The truth is, she was radical. She was bold. And she was right. Thanks for watching. If this story changed the way you see Susan B. Anthony, hit that like button, subscribe for more untold chapters of history, and drop a comment. What surprised you the most about her radical legacy? Remember, real change doesn't come from playing it safe. It comes from people brave enough to break the rules. History isn't just what we're taught. It's what we dare to uncover.